LinkedIn presents.
When 40% of American workers earn less than the actual cost of living, we've got a lot of Americans who are pretty limited in how much they can participate in their local economies. A higher minimum wage would give tens of millions of consumers more money to spend in their local businesses and restaurants, boosting the economy. If you owned a small bar, which should you care more about? Paying your one or two bartenders an extra $5 an hour? Or the fact that 30 people in your bar have more beer money in their pockets? Sure, expenses go up, but the amount of money you have coming in more than makes up for it.
It's Thursday, and I'm Michael Kavanagh. Welcome to the Next Big Idea Daily, the show where we tackle thought-provoking questions and uncover bold ideas from today's brightest minds. Be sure to follow us for new episodes and leave a rating or review in your podcast player. Now, has your paycheck been looking a bit flat lately? Well, you're not alone. In America, millions of full-time employees are barely scraping by. Despite record-breaking productivity and profits, wages have stagnated, leaving 40% of workers earning less than the cost of living. It doesn't have to be this way. In their new book, Pay the People, Why Fair Pay is Good for Business and Great for America, business leaders John Driscoll and Morris Pearl argue that raising wages isn't just a moral imperative, it's an economic one. Higher pay fuels consumer spending, reduces turnover, boosts productivity, and strengthens the entire economy. John joins us with 5 key insights from their guide to a fairer, more prosperous future right after this short break.
I'm Jessie Hempel, host of Hello Monday. In my 20s, I knew what I wanted from my career. But from where I am now, in the middle of my life, nothing feels as certain. Work's changing, we're changing, and there's no guidebook for how to make sense of any of it. So every Monday, I bring you conversations with people who are thinking deeply about work and where it fits into our lives. We talk about making career pivots, about purpose and how to discern it, about where happiness fits into the mix, and how to ask for more money. Come join us in the Hello Monday community. Let's figure out the future together. Listen to Hello Monday with Jessie Hempel wherever you get your podcasts.
Have you been feeling the effects of stress, burnout, or anxiety at work? Listen to the Anxious Achiever podcast to rethink the relationship between your career and your mental health. Get The Anxious Achiever wherever you find your podcasts and walk away with practical advice you can implement today.
Paying a higher minimum wage unlocks the power of your people. In 2013, when I was hired as the new CEO of a struggling healthcare company, CareCentrix, my investors told me to cut costs so that we could shrink our way to survival. We weren't taking care of our customers, and our sales had slipped. But like most businesses, we were largely a people-powered company, and many of our employees were struggling to survive on the wages we paid. We were asking more from our employees and paying many of them less in real terms every year. When CareCentrix, like many businesses, anchors entry-level pay at the federal minimum wage, we force our low-wage workers to run faster and faster up the down escalator of real wages, paying less each year for the same amount of work. After I became CEO, I made sure that my employees could reach me directly, and after an initial period of awkwardness, many did. I learned a lot about what we could do to improve our business, and I also came face to face with the everyday challenges of our lower paid employees. Roughly a third of our company made less than the prevailing living wage at the time of $15 an hour. What that translated to was full-time employees not being able to pay their bills. We had one customer service rep living out of her car with her child, and another claims specialist who was looking for an advance to pay for diapers. Another middle manager was paying out of her own pocket to make sure she could get turkey dinners for Thanksgiving for her team. My company's not unique. Our economy is largely based on business services, and many service companies pay as little as they legally can. Even today, 12 years later, nearly 20 million workers earn less than $15 an hour. I came up with a novel solution at the time. I froze my salary and all senior executives' pay and invested in the people who we depended on and who depended on us to pay them a fair wage. We more than doubled our entry-level wages from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour, lifting the pay of nearly a third of the company. And it proved to be a great investment. It unlocked the power of our people to succeed. We cut turnover, that's employees leaving for higher paying jobs, nearly in half. We boosted the productivity of our call centers and claims payment centers by over 30%. Over the next 9 years, CareCentrix tripled in size and more than quadrupled in value before being sold to Walgreens in 2022. Higher wages help grow the economy. Raising the minimum wage helps low-wage workers get paid more, but it can pay benefits to all of us. Our economy depends on consumer demand. 70% of the growth of the American economy depends on the ability of ordinary people to buy goods and services. But when the cost of living speeds up and real wages drift down, we are suppressing that growth. Right now, 40% of working Americans, more than 50 million people, make less than the standard cost of living for a single person with no kids, which is approximately $20 an hour. We have a substantial underclass of Americans working full-time jobs for near poverty wages. And that's not because American workers are any less productive. In fact, they make their employers more money than ever. Throughout the 20th century, up to the late 1970s, workers' productivity gains were matched with wage increases. When workers made their employees more money, they earned more. And America's economic growth was the envy of the world. Since then, productivity has grown by more than 70%, and wages have increased less than 10%. Nearly all of those profits from all that increased productivity went to Wall Street investors and executives like me. Congress has allowed our wage floor, the federal minimum wage, to stay fixed while the prices of nearly everything else have gone up. The minimum wage hasn't been raised in 15 years and is still $7.25 an hour, or $15,000 a year for full-time work. Things haven't always been this disconnected. If the minimum wage had kept up with inflation since its peak purchasing power in 1968, today it would be close to $15 an hour. And if the federal minimum wage had kept pace with both inflation and productivity since 1968, it would be nearly $26 an hour. But that's not where we are, with a federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. And there's not a single county in the entire country where that meets the cost of living. When 40% of American workers earn less than the actual cost of living, we've got a lot of Americans who are pretty limited in how much they can participate in their local economies. A higher minimum wage would give tens of millions of consumers more money to spend in their local businesses and restaurants, boosting the economy. If you owned a small bar, which should you care more about? Paying your one or two bartenders an extra $5 an hour? Or the fact that 30 people in your bar have more beer money in their pockets. Sure, expenses go up, but the amount of money you have coming in more than makes up for it. Paying a living wage is the new gold standard for great companies. While increasing consumer demand is one compelling reason businesses should support a higher minimum wage, I found that paying low-wage workers more paid unexpected dividends for my business. And that turns out to be the case for much larger and more successful companies as well. There is no company in America that is more focused on low cost than Walmart. It's the most successful retailer in the world. And yet in 2015, under the leadership of their new CEO, Doug McMillon, they committed to raise their wages above the minimum of $7.25 an hour, as well as shift away from part-time work towards more full-time work for their team. They massively improved morale and reduced employee turnover. Today, Walmart earns more revenue than any other company in America, and since 2015, their stock price has outperformed the S&P 500. There's now reams of academic research that documents how higher paid, happier workers are more productive and less likely to switch jobs, an invisible cost that most companies don't know they don't have to pay. Turnover turns out to be very expensive. For the average company with just 100 employees, turnover costs typically run to about $2.6 million per year. So paying employees a higher wage can often save you money. And research also shows that companies with better paid employees experience higher customer satisfaction, improved profitability, and a faster growing stock price. It's a clear business win, and that's why we're seeing more super successful companies like Walmart and the Bank of America raise their employees' wages to a living wage. They found that in most cases, higher pay pays for itself. As JP Morgan Chase's CEO Jamie Dimon explained in his letter to shareholders, quote, "The more you invest in people, whether through better wages, better benefits, or better training, the more successful your business will be." Business needs government to set the rules for fair pay. While more corporate leaders understand the value of a living wage, there are still too many incentives for companies to prioritize short-term profit over long-term value, pushing CEOs to cut costs. Many can't see how wage increases will help their business in a few years. They're worried about the profits for the next month. And with the federal minimum wage at $7.25 and many states still requiring less than $15 an hour, many small businesses pay as little as possible, which is why there are 11 million employees working full-time who qualify for food stamps. When businesses fail to pay a living wage, the taxpayers pick up the bill. At another end of the spectrum, there are some business leaders who will do whatever it takes, even bending the law, to pay their employees even less. Wage theft is rampant, with thousands of businesses confiscating tips and forcing people to work overtime without pay. Every year, economists estimate that employers in America steal around $50 billion in wages from their employees. That's more than 3 times what's lost to shoplifting every year. The executives greenlighting wage theft are not going to raise wages even if it's a long-term winner. They're too selfish. The only way to reliably fix the problem of low wages is for Congress to change the rules for everyone and mandate that working people be paid a wage that they can afford to live on. The politicians need to catch up to their voters. The political fight over minimum wage is so frustrating because it's born out of not understanding how business and the economy works. Raising wages is a win-win for workers and businesses. The people who claim that doing so will kill jobs and destroy businesses have been proven wrong time and time again. We now don't have to guess what's going to happen. There have been dozens of cities and states that raised their minimum wage over the last decade, and in each case, it's gone well. Some critics say a higher minimum wage causes businesses to close. Yet a year after the state of California raised its minimum wage for fast food workers to $20 an hour, there are now 10,000 new fast food jobs in California. And Denny's restaurant CEO admitted on a shareholder call that higher minimum wages in California actually led to their locations in California performing better. Some fear that a higher minimum wage leads to rising inflation and higher costs for consumers. But during peak inflation over the last several years, states with a $15 minimum wage saw essentially the same levels of inflation as those with a $7.25 minimum wage. America's voters already understand the argument. Too many full-time workers are paid too little, and the majority of voters believe that workers should not have to suffer to succeed, while members of Congress have sat on their hands on raising the minimum wage. Over the past 15 years, Democratic and Republican voters in red states and blue have reliably voted to raise the minimum wage in 21 out of 22 ballot initiatives. Even in Republican strongholds like Missouri and Alaska, voters recently voted to approve raising the wage. It's time for Congress to catch up to their voters and raise the minimum wage to a living wage. It will help low-wage workers, but it will also help us grow the economy for all of us.
Thank you, John. Okay, everyone, get yourself a copy of Pay the People at your favorite bookstore. And remember, if you want to have big ideas like this right in your pocket, head over to the App Store and download our Next Big Idea app. I'm Michael Kovnat. See you tomorrow.